back to our series. Today we're going to be picking up right where we left off last time, and today we're going to be taking a look at that keel and seeing what we can do to fix that. Last video we talked about how the oil is saturating the wooden frames running along here, and that's led to a lot of deterioration on the frame pieces. And we also mentioned how the keel itself is actually bowing right here down this way. So today we're going to try to address this dip in the keel, as well as get started on cleaning and replacing any of the broken frame supports on this boat. So to get a visual on what exactly we're looking at, I attached a rope at the front of it, taped it down in the middle, and then I attached it at the rear. So we can actually see, the camera should pick this up right there, how far away the rope is from that keel. You'll see it sticks to it, and then it bulges out pretty significantly. And I marked the dead middle of that right here. Now, how this keel is connected to the frame is you'll see there's two fasteners right here on each one of those. So we'll remove those out, and then our plan is to push this keel up and either put in shims or rebuild these frames so that they're a little bit bigger. So after using the Forstner bit on drilling out these little plugs, we are then going to extract the fasteners. So I've just crawled up inside of the boat here, and I have the jack positioned underneath that part on the keel that I had marked earlier. Ideally, I'd like to put it right here, but seeing as this frame is in the way right now, I'm just going to get it as close as I can. And then I'm gonna slowly raise this level up until the spotter person on the outside can tell me if that wire is touching the wood. And we're just gonna see what kind of flex we can get out of this keel. With a little bit of tension on there, I'm actually able to identify another issue. So far I have quite a bit of space here and space here. Keep in mind I took out the fastener for this one, and this one right here, and this one is currently disassembled. It's not actually fastened in that particular spot because if you remember, I believe the second or third video, we had to remove that brass piece here. So there isn't actually fasteners coming through this way into this frame, but something I did notice is that this frame back here is coming off from the keel. So the fasteners seated in the keel going down into the frame in that particular one should be holding, but in fact they're actually lifting up right now. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to hold that down with a clamp, and I'm just going to see if we can get any more movement out of this keel. So after we jacked up the keel, we had to fasten this piece onto this main frame due to the fact that the fasteners are no longer holding it to the frame section. I also had to fasten the actual boat down to the carriage, because you can imagine I'm lifting this up and the boat's starting to rock. So that's tight now, and then I also put a little bit of weight here to counteract it lifting off the ground. Now, after doing all of that, we have the keel just about straight. We also have it right here where it's a little bit high. So just a quick explanation. This is the main frame, and we call it that because it connects to the hull, down the side of the hull onto this frame. So this is the main structural supporting frame, and then this is the support frame, because it only connects to this piece. And as you can tell, this isn't fastened to anything. Neither is this one. This one's not terrible, but essentially what's supposed to happen here is the plank comes off of this, and this has to be parallel with the plank for a nice transition, such as this main frame right here. And then following that edge, it goes up and along, and it's supposed to be parallel with this piece. Now keep in mind, this frame, after lifting this up, should go perfectly symmetrical with this, but look at the distance I have here. Obviously, you know, it's moving, but still look at the width we have between here and here. So this should be one straight line from here all the ways across down to this point. That way you get a nice consistent support along whatever material, whether it's a plank or marine plywood, that's going to be underneath it. So after taking a look at a couple of these and noticing not only that, but also the actual gap we have here. You see the massive gap? We are going to have to rebuild these. And the simple answer for that is if I put a piece of wood in here as a shim, and I get this keel sitting up nice and high, nice and straight, well then we suddenly run into the other issue where this no longer meets up with this. So unfortunately that's not possible to just put a shim in here on this particular case. So I am gonna have to rebuild these. Now, what that's gonna look like is I'm gonna make sure that I build a straight piece of mahogany that runs along here. The top of it lines up with this and this point, and I'm gonna leave these till after I get that installed. Once it's installed, then I can put down my strips of wood. I can mark with a pencil where it's gonna sit in here because it might be different once I get it, you know, positioned and fastened. And then we'll hook up our router and we'll cut out the hole for the batten to sit in. But essentially that's where we're at right now. So what I'm gonna be doing next is just tidying up all of the debris on here so I can lay some tape in some spots, and I'm gonna start templating out what we have to replace. Now we also did notice little bits of damage or repairs, it looks like, in various areas. Something to keep in mind, you can tell if it's not supposed to be like that if the exact opposite side looks completely different. So you can see someone's attached a piece of wood in that area, whereas here you just have a crack. So there should be one nice straight piece, and if you look on the front, there's also another piece of wood attached to this, which I don't see on that side. If you're ever confused about how it should look, just keep in mind that symmetry is very important. It wouldn't have come out of the factory not symmetrical. It would have been nice and symmetrical with all the frames, all the designs. So if anything seems out of whack, just compare it to the other side, and that'll give you a good idea. So that all being said, I'm going to clean all these off with the scraper here. The debris is pretty loose at the moment, so just gonna be scraping it, getting it clean, seeing what I have to template, and then once that is all done, I'll show you guys the templating process and what we have to do to start building new structural support for this. I've identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different frame supports that need addressing, whether that be complete reconstruction of them or repair, as well as this part here that has to be refastened. It is the same on the other side as well, but we're gonna start with this piece right here as the one that we're gonna repair. Now, there's a couple of different pieces going on here, so let's go over what they are. We have 2 pieces we're gonna be replacing on this. The first one, this piece of wood right here, is the same as this. It's a supporting bracket for this frame running up and along here. So that piece is only gonna go from here to the other side right there and support up on the bottom. And then the second piece we're gonna be replacing is, of course, this part right here, this other main frame area. Now that piece will be running from here along this section like that, and then down along the main frame up for the support there. So I'll be disassembling this and getting it all set up to be replaced. So in the process of removing this, I've undone the fasteners from this side. This one is currently just spinning. I do believe it's due to the fact that the main frame is no longer one piece. And then right here, there is a little carriage bolt. So I'm gonna go underneath here, it's 1/2 inch on this one, and remove that so I can get this plank up and out of here. Once that nut is out, I'm also just gonna remove the floor support fasteners from here and here so that I can take that piece right out of here. As always, I am going to keep these. Here's that piece removed from the boat here. It appears that this is actually white oak. A couple of ways you can tell. The grain line is always going to be a little bit longer on white oak, so you'll have longer dashes. Mahogany will be a bunch of really short ones, as well as when white oak begins to break down and degrade, for whatever reason, it also has these these little cracks that go this way. For some reason, this is something that white oak does. Now, you're welcome to use mahogany or white oak when you're rebuilding. White oak, that is a little bit more resilient to rot. A little bit ironic, I'm saying that, but it is a little bit more resilient. So now the fun part is I get to introduce a new part of this series. So Up until this point, all of the money that we have spent on this boat has been in the acquisition of it. We haven't spent any money on anything whatsoever. Obviously, we had our own tools laying around, but we haven't spent any money material. So going forward, I'm going to try to the best of my capability to show you how much money we're going to be putting into this boat. So I'll have a little counter pop up right about here, and it'll show you exactly how much each piece costs, so you can have kind of a ballpark idea if you were to attempt something like this yourself. So there's a piece of wood sticking up here with a carriage bolt, and it's a piece of mahogany which doesn't match anything else on here so far. So I'm going to assume that this was put in after the fact. Somebody else added this, and look how the the mahogany just shattered versus this oak, which slowly deteriorated. The mahogany just split in half. So after looking around in our shop at the wood pile, we actually don't have any extra wood left over to put onto this boat for the frame right now. So I believe Andrew is going to go pick some of that up for us in a bit. And again, I'll put down how much that costs on the video, but we will get back over to that gas tank that's sitting over there. One of the first couple of episodes, I talked about how we would save that for a rainy day and see what kind of gas comes out of that thing. And what do you know it? It's currently raining, so I got this super sketchy setup here. I'm gonna be dumping the gas out of the tank into the bucket. We're gonna see what kind of mess comes out of here. Well, that is not very good gas. There's maybe about this much in there. You can hardly see the bottom of the bucket. Let's see what else we got. So next we're going to remove this fuel sending unit, and we'll take these wires off of here and we'll pull this on out as well. And I'll just give you a quick rundown on what these two wires actually do with this fuel sending unit and how these actually function. Now, I kind of figured this was the case when I was moving the gas tank around. I could hear something banging around in there. Now, if you're not familiar with what's missing from this image, there should be a floater attached to the end of it. Much like this one that I got from upstairs, there's a floating unit on here. So that's come off apparently at some point, and I can hear it banging around the tank. So we are gonna have to remove that from there, get that out entirely. We'll probably, oops, sorry about that. We'll probably end up replacing this with a new one, and I'll walk you guys through how we can set these universal style ones up in here. But that'll be in for a future video, but I might as well go over the function of these and how they actually operate and provide you with a signal going back to your fuel gauge. So here we are back at the whiteboard. So to go over how the circuit works for the fuel gauge system on here, it's quite simple. So you have your battery, say negative and positive terminals. You have your fuel gauge, put that right there, and then you have your sending unit over here. So how this system operates, keep in mind all electrical circuits run in a big circle. So you have your positive, which goes out, comes back to the negative for that to function. So in order for these circuits to work, you'll take the positive coming off of the battery, you'll run it down here. In between it, you'll have your ignition shut off, all that. I'm just showing you a very simplified version of this. So your positive will come up, run into one side of the fuel gauge, and if I was to just ground it right here, what you would end up seeing is full. It would be maxed out because you have full amount of current running through here and grounding out. There's nothing limiting anything. So that's what would happen if you grounded it right there. So what these little sending units do, it's quite ingenious. You take the ground and you bring it down to this. What ends up happening is the ground will come down through here, and right on this part of the sending unit, there'll be a little needle with a whole bunch of little ribs made of copper. And that needle will wipe across these pieces as this arm moves. And I'll show you guys what that looks like in a second here, but essentially what that does is it changes the resistance that it takes for this circuit to ground out. So the power will come down through here, into here looking for a ground. It will be directed straight down to this little wiper. Once it goes through this little wiper mechanism, the power will then come back up, or the ground, and it will then leave out the side the ground. Now, being that this is a boat and not an automotive application, typically in automotive applications, ground is ground. You just pin it to something metal. But in boat applications, it's actually necessary that you find a way to wire this back up to the negative on the battery post. So whether that be a separate junction box where everything meets up, it does have to go back to the battery. You can't just attach it to wood unless it's very salt saturated, then you have different problems. But essentially that's how that works. So positive through here, this changes the resistance, which then in turn changes how much power can actually flow through here, and that will affect what your gas tank shows up as. Now, here's an example of that mechanical electronics that I was talking about. So here you can see the two little contact points rubbing on these little arching copper points as well. And what that does is the farther it gets in one direction, the higher the resistance is. So it'll actually drop the voltage overall in the whole system. And it's really interesting because that arm will actually sit in here, and that'll be what dictates where this is. But yeah, super interesting little circuit that has been in use ever since fuel senders were working and in cars. This was the first real system they had for detecting what your fuel level was at, and it actually remained this simple system in a different variation for quite a long time. So this is what we're left with. I'd say about 30 liters of just disgusting gas, not really usable in much. I don't know if I'd even put this in my pressure washer. It's quite discolored. It smells kind of funky. So we're gonna try to immediately get rid of this. Like I said, I'm gonna fill it up with funnels into this and another one I have, and then we'll dispose of it. As for what's left inside the tank, you can just take a look for yourself there. It's quite corroded. There's a lot of debris on the side of the tank as well. And if you take a look at all of that sand that's in the bottom, it's important that we clean this out so that none of that debris gets into the carburetor, past the fuel system. Sorry, the fuel filter, I should say. So that'll be the next step. Well, that's gonna do it for the video today, guys. We're currently waiting for some wood to come in. And once that's in, then we can move on to rebuilding these frame pieces and going from there. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video.